Hey guys, I hope you guys are having a terrific day. This is the summary of chapter 3, relatively short, so let's get through it. Fear and its little brother anxiety keep many adoptees and birth mothers from doing what they need to do in their lives, from learning to love themselves and thus being prepared to love others and allow intimacy into their lives. I just lost my place. To discovering and actualizing their potential in a meaningful profession or lifestyle. Most of that fear, which is most often felt as anxiety, is coming from an ancient place in their history, the separation from one from the other. This trauma created imprints on the brain. Or in the brain? Both? Anyway, which get triggered whenever any event with the slightest similarity to the original trauma is encountered. The feelings that this engenders are very difficult to ignore. No one is saying to ignore these feelings, but we are saying to feel them and push through them to form a new pathway. Then practice until the pathway is more deeply imprinted and can supersede the original pathway. Okay, so I've kind of talked about this before, but when we have trauma, especially as babies, right, pre-verbal trauma, there's nothing to compare it to. When it is after verbalization, right, there is something that we can compare it to. So like, for example, with NICU babies, there's the study that they still suffer from separation, right? When they are in the, I can't remember what it's called. When they're in the incubators, that's what I was trying to say. When they're in their, bubble, right, healing, and they're not near their parent, it could be mother or father, they have separation anxiety. They are feeling the very same things that we do. The difference is that their mothers, right, their biological mothers or fathers come back. So while they stress when they're away from them, they are relieved. They know that the parent is going to come back. Now, I've heard there's long-term issues, not to the same extent that we do, but they understand a little bit more. So why can't they understand that for adoptees? I do not understand. Anyway, what I was getting to is when we have the pre-verbal trauma, we have nothing to compare it to, right? We can't necessarily get back to that, what happened before. So it's very, very difficult for us. I'm not saying impossible, but I'm saying very difficult. When you have, say, a foster child, right, who is maybe 1, 2, 3, right, starting to verbalize, they may not necessarily remember the actual event, but they can remember their emotions, right? It's imprinted on our bodies. If you've heard the term, Our Body Keeps Score, which is also a book, that is exactly it. Our body remembers those feelings, even if we can't remember the memory. And our bodies hold on to it. It creates chronic illness. It creates long-term issues. And so what Nancy Newton-Verrier is saying is we have to work through that to relax, right? I did find that doing breath work at one point, and I do want to get back to it in practice, was really, really helpful to relaxing. But it took me a very long time to even begin to learn how to do it properly, to actually feel it in my bones, right? To do meditation, for me at least, there are times where it has to be a very specific audio where I can visualize everything, or a certain person, a calming voice. Not all voices are going to be calming to every individual. That helps me relax. Again, I should get back to this. But as I was saying in one of my previous videos in this chapter, was that it takes 21 days to create a habit. And we can retrain our brain to do things. Maybe you've heard of, really terrible accidents happening where someone can no longer walk for a while. I'm not saying it's going to be every time, but, where they have to learn to re-walk, if they have, like, say, spinal surgery, right? There's physical therapy. This is an example from my dad, right? He broke his hip a couple years ago. He had surgery and he had physical therapy to help him retrain how to walk properly and get stronger. That's exactly what Nancy Newton-Verrier is insinuating. I don't know if she worded it the best way. Like, it's very hard to sometimes understand what she's saying, but that's where I'm getting at. Anyway, continuing on. Taking steps to form new patterns in the brain seems like a big risk. But in order for adoptees and birth mothers to have a fuller and richer life, risk is necessary. Remember that the brain is pliable until death and able to form new pathways, right? So our nerves, our memory, there's always something that we can work through, right? As John Ratey says, the brain is amazingly plastic. Rewiring is possible throughout life. He also emphasizes that we must do something unfamiliar in a situation which is similar to an experience that no longer serves us well. See it as an adventure, not without risks, but exciting and beneficial to your well-being. Now, I cannot speak to birth parents because while some do overlap with being an adoptee as well and also being an adoptive parent, which is wild to me, that doesn't mean that, how do I explain this? For those that are strictly birth parents, right, or birth parents and adoptive parents, they have the experience of being able to verbalize before there was trauma, unlike us, that are adopted at birth, right? And so they know what life was like prior to having lost their child. And I think it's important that when they do that, when they remember back, right, that they can gain that feeling. That doesn't mean that their loss, right, our loss isn't valid. But to, like I was saying about getting back to our happy times and self-care, it is important, right? If it means learning your history, if it means checking up on said child or searching so you have answers, then do it. It's not going to always be rainbows and butterflies. I'm going to tell you guys, it is not, especially with reunions. There are so many ways it can go. But understand that there is still a loss. And if that means, you guys might laugh. I saw, before the TikTok ban was officially in, one of the last videos I saw was a woman who was having a funeral for her arm. And, I thought it was interesting. So it was her prosthetic arm, which was going to be her future arm, but she had lost her living arm due to cancer, and this was her way of moving on. I also saw, I think it was a Luring Skull, Jory, I think her name is Jory, right? She moved, but before she fully transitioned, she did a funeral for the death of her, former self. And if that's what you need to do to move on, you know what? I'm actually really for it. I think it's really, really helpful. I was also watching 911, the show, and there was a death doula episode. And while that's not the first time I've heard of death doula, I thought it was very fascinating. and maybe they can also help and move on, right? Having a therapist and do that. Anyway, I gotta go. I love you guys, and I will see you guys next time for chapter 4.